This call may be recorded for note-taking and coaching purposes.
Hello, Carl.
Hi, buddy. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Not too bad, my friend. Not too bad. Keeping well?
Good to see you. Good to see you. It's been a while, but we seem to keep in touch, don't we, you and I?
We do, my friend. Yeah, I can't. I mean, we don't keep in touch
Shake me.
enough, but at least we're better than some folks I know.
Oh man, I get told by family and friends I'm not keeping in touch enough. God, it's it's hard. It's just busy. I'm just what's your main thing right now? What are you spending all your time on, or most of your time on?
Most of the time's on the invisible side, right? All this AI stuff, and yeah, it's good. It's just how the whole area is just exploding, as you well know. It's just trying to establish some level of focus and sell this stuff into food, hospitality, retail organizations.
Right. And you enjoying it?
Yeah, it's crazy scale up startup life still, and you know that all too well.
Yeah.
But it's more of a grown up startup than some others. I mean, this one's been around 10 years. It's 100, what do we do? 140 mil in revenue last year. So, it's doing all right for itself.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah. How about you? What's going on with you?
Mate, things are good here. Had a good year last year. We're growing in all the areas you want to be growing, which is great. Outside of cannabis as well, like really making a push into that. So, yeah, pretty strong now in cannabis, like really sort of, I'd say the dominant sort of player. But Bev Alc is our new vertical we've gone into. So we actually started
Interesting.
This process 2 years ago. When I came in to take over sales, the CRO went off and really became like the Chief Innovation Officer or something more in that ilk.
Yeah.
To his credit, because he was a one-man band, but we've gone to sort of start. I wouldn't say we've cracked Bev Alc, but we've one of our the strongest pieces of our technology is a cannabis brand can buy an ad on an e-commerce menu where they're sold. So a retailer here, brand there, but the brand can buy. That's where you want to advertise, right? At the point of purchase. And also we do that in store on the screens in store. We've just done that. We just launched in January with our first Bev Alc retailer. So we have Top 10 Liquors as our first partner. And you can see brands like Heirloom, which is a hemp-derived beverage, but others. If you go to Top 10 Liquors, you might see an ad from them, and you might, Carl, click on that ad, and you might buy it, and then so that's we've sort of diversified out of cannabis into, frankly, an industry that comes right directly into our world, because we realized there was no retail media network, and we'd built this technology, and it works great. So why not go do it in another market? So that's been our big sort of area of innovation. But I've just been over here keeping the lights on, really, with my team and making sure the money's coming in.
I was at this show called Grocery Talk. When was it? September, October time last year, and I was blown away to hear that the 1% margin that out of what for every 1% of margin that's made at a grocery store, the equivalent is made on retail media, and how these retailers now are as much advertising platforms than anything.
Publishers, yeah, we call them publishers.
Yeah.
Because they're opening up their e-commerce to essentially a new revenue stream as well. I mean, the main thing it does is it makes sure that if a brand, any CPG brand, cannabis, Bev Alc, doesn't really matter, they go all that effort, to get on the shelf. They got to then make sure the thing sells, right? And that's what this does primarily. It makes sure that it helps things sell, but it also spins off, at least in cannabis, we're still figuring this out due to some regulatory stuff in Bev Alc, but cannabis dispensaries, they get like a cut of that revenue as well. So it's a little, we don't call it a network just because it's kind of a bit of a dirty word, but it sort of is that. But instead of it being like weed maps, it's the brands and the retailers sort of controlling it themselves. So that's exciting because cannabis is fine, but we're not getting any. Well, we're about to talk about all this formally, I guess. But exciting to go into that world, and then we're also just doing a lot with just general agencies, just general advertising agencies that want to provide our sort of services. And so yeah, mate, it's been good.
So we're not recording yet.
We are recording, but funnily enough, like I've only ever done this live.
Yeah.
And obviously we can just merge straight into the questions here. But you and I, just after 420 last year, conversation initially, and I wanted to do something then, and it just didn't feel like the right time. Now's the right time because obviously we're just a bit ahead of it.
Yep.
And we've had, and my team are having conversations with a few brands right now. Some of the ones I mentioned to you last year, because the timing's right. So I just thought it was, I'd reach out again and see if you're available to do it in this format, right? So we could just quickly do it and get it done. Yeah. Selfishly, because you're a very respected and very well known person in the restaurant industry, and I have some notoriety in the cannabis industry. Maybe some from my former.
That sounds ominous, mate, when you put it like that.
Well, I don't put myself on your level, but I thought now's the time. Let's come together, have the conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is honestly a fun one. It's food and cannabis, and look, I appreciate there's still a bunch of people in the world that have reservations over cannabis, and I respect that. Everyone has that freedom. I don't happen to be one of them, right? I'm very passionate about it and really very involved in the industry. But it's also food, and so it's the match made in heaven. It's got some funny cliches to it as well, right? Because maybe all of us have been there at some point having the munchies or whatever, but it's beyond that. That's what I want to talk to you about is, more the cultural moment and the normalization and so forth. And then obviously what does that mean for, restaurants and how they can leverage that for, customer acquisition and revenue and all that fun stuff. So maybe you can give your perspective to start on, I don't know if we're starting here, we're like 10 minutes in, but whatever, on overall.
Do you want to start this thing about, how are you planning on putting this out there? Do we want to introduce ourselves? How is it going to get published? What's your thinking around that?
Well, we can do that. I mean, I was just going to keep it super informal, and I was just about to get into it, but I guess we can do intros. I think what Nicole will do is take edits and sound bites, and we'll use those, I think, primarily. But yeah, we can do we can sort of start officially and do intros and go from there.
Let's do it, man.
All right. Well, Carl, mate, great to see you. Thank you for joining.
I
know we said we'd do this last year, and I was a bit late for 420, but I did say we'd get ahead of it this year, and look at us. Here we are. We got ahead of it, and I want to talk to you about this. I want to talk about restaurants and food and how it relates to cannabis and the cultural moment that's here. So thank you for joining me. So everyone, I'm Anthony. I lead sales at Surfside. I'm the host of Surf Sessions live stream and podcast, which we are very happy to welcome Carl Orsbourn, my old buddy from Kitchen United days, who has remained, you have remained more than ever, a face and a name in the restaurant industry, and a couple of books down since those days, and exciting work you're doing today as well. So, mate, welcome, and just really stoked to have you here and to dig into your expertise.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been a few years since you and I were together selling ghost kitchens, but the world of technology and consumer verticals continues to move forward quite rapidly. And these days I'm in the AI space with a company called Invisible Technologies and trying to help folks think about that side of things as opposed to ghost kitchens. But it's all much of a muchness, right? It's all about how are these things converging together? How are they really starting to make an impact? Of course, not just for our consumers that we service, but actually with the organizations that are trying to make sense of this. And it's happened very quickly. The big scheme of things, you think about the way in which technologies come together, it's really become something that has been a force in these last 5 years or so that really has just moved at speeds that I don't think anyone truly anticipated.
And so how does that relate, mate? I mean, the restaurant industry, let's start really high level maybe, because we're going to get into, what is ultimately here, what is the opportunity for restaurant brands around not really just 420, just overall with the cultural movement that is cannabis reform. But maybe we'll start high level. Like, I've been out of the industry a few years. You're very, very deep in it. what are the major challenges and so forth that the average restaurant franchisee or restaurant group or single operators facing today?
Yeah, well, let's start with where we left off, you and I, right? The rise of off-premise. When I wrote my first book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant, it was all about helping the restaurant industry understand this brand new channel that had existed, of course, before, but now was coming really very much to the forefront of everyone's minds, largely driven by the pandemic and the fact that customers were having e-commerce experiences in all other verticals and yet not necessarily seeing it as part of a restaurant experience. So digital ordering, consumer behavior, yes, the AI piece of it are certainly areas which have changed that industry, particularly over the last few years. But yeah, the industry's probably never had as tough a period as it has had right now over these last few years. Why? Traffic, traffic, transactions, the demand volatility. There's clearly all the issues associated to inflation, the way in which costs have impacted not only the cost of products within restaurants, but also the things associated to labor, whether that be labor shortages, right? The pandemic had a major impact from that standpoint, impacting the availability of the workforce. And so these rising costs have then led into a situation where restaurants are already on very thin margins, are seeking greater levels of efficiency and these alternative revenue streams. Add into that then this whole thing around the marketing noise and the consumer engagement that can come by embracing e-commerce channels and trying to break through, I guess, the digital clutter out there. The traditional tactics that a lot of the marketeers in restaurants have used in the past are being oversaturated. You got that, and then you got things like regulatory complexity, right? So there's a similarity there in comparison to restaurants and your world. And so there's this whole piece around staying compliant while exploring all these kind of new marketing frontiers. And I think that's where a lot of the similarities might exist in the cannabis adjacent advertising, right? So for me, similar themes come through, yes, AI, data-driven personalization. Yes, the idea of how can we incorporate these new revenue streams. Maybe that's collaborations with cannabis brands, infused products, maybe just catering more specifically to cannabis-friendly audiences. And then thinking about the day parts that this plays into, right? When I worked in the cannabis space myself and was responsible for an e-commerce area, I remember just the surge of delivery and the late night window. And of course, you remember when you and I were talking about virtual brands and utilizing those to take advantage of those little windows? Well, guess what? It's a similar type of mentality. So there are some, you might not, if someone was just to think about it quickly, they might not go, well, what are these two talking about, restaurants and cannabis together? But actually, the deeper you go into it, there are some very interesting parallels here.
Well, mate, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things, just as an individual data point, to suggest or demonstrate exactly what you're talking about, is DoorDash are now, just this week I read, I think a couple of days ago, leaning more into delivery of the hemp-derived beverages and those types of products, which is a kind of another baby step, if you will. But it's all going in that general direction, right? And so I've never thought, Carl, until now about that concept of cannabis brands having those specific types of brands available at certain times of day or certain parts of the country or delivery zones. Yeah, you always get me thinking, mate. I love that.
Don't think too hard. I don't want those smoke to come out those ears.
On that, well, you know me, I won't go too far. Mate, on the regulatory side, it's interesting because I would argue that, after spending only a few years really in the restaurant space, maybe call it 4, I think, in the end, and I've been in this space now about 4-ish, maybe 5-ish. I'd say the regulations still sort of are even harder for obvious reasons on these customers here for, the way that the way that they're taxed and the way they're able to not write off expenditures and those sorts of things. So, it continues to be really challenging. That was a word that I was at a conference just recently down your way in the OC, Benzinga Capital Conference for Cannabis. And when I got up on stage to run my panel, I called out that the number one word I'd heard used that day thus far was challenging. Everyone was challenging this, challenging that. And it certainly is, right? And so they're cannabis brands, cannabis retailers, they're looking as well for how to cut through the noise, how to, create new revenue streams, how to, build these sorts of partnerships, especially in community, especially locally. The restaurant is a really local experience in many cases for folks. Can be a local business or of that local feel. Same with dispensaries, right? Yeah, there are chains on both sides of that, but it is still, people generally go to something that's within a certain geographical distance of them, and I think that's another place where I just see just direct parallels between restaurants and cannabis. These are brick and mortar businesses that need to figure out ways to get people to come in, and they're also e-commerce businesses, and they need to figure out ways for people to buy and order online. They need to cater to both of those. But choice is everywhere in both categories. There's so many places to go and choose to eat. There's so many places, especially places here like California, to go and buy cannabis that just little bits and pieces, little opportunities to break through the noise, do something different. I think on both sides is really valuable. And that's really what I want to focus on today, is more on what can the restaurants do. Maybe another time we can focus sort of more on the flip side, but how can restaurants embrace this audience, right? Assuming that they are comfortable with it. And we've seen a number of brands already do this. I've seen Ike's do a sandwich. I've seen KFC do some stuff. There's a few others have already gone down this road. So the taboo is still there in some cases for some brands, but more and more I think they are confident to go down this road. So what do you think in that regard, Carl? How can a restaurant brand embrace the audience and sort of ride the wave of cultural change?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I started working at one of California's largest dispensaries, I had a lot of mental models that had to be broken, Anthony. My view was the majority of our customers were going to be 20-somethings looking to get high for the weekend.
Right.
And when I saw people of our age, clearly middle-aged gentlemen of a fine wine kind of age, coming in and seeing the industry as, yes, sometimes for a bit of fun, but also perhaps more personally, a reflection perhaps of the terrible healthcare system that we have, it really made me sit back and go, wow. Now, I start answering a question like that because the cannabis audience is quite diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, if you treat them right, they can be incredibly loyal.
Mm.
And that goes across from millennials, Gen X, boomers, even seniors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that therefore means there's this real opportunity for high repeat engagement and being able to build into that kind of habitual purchasing behavior. Now, has anything I said there seemed different about restaurants? No. Diverse but loyal. Lots of opportunities for high repeat engagement if you treat them right and you think about the user experience. And then the piece around it that I think is perhaps more specific to cannabis is that you do have typically a high order value, right? So then you've got high repeat engagement, high order value. That's really quite powerful. And then when you think about the digital first aspect of it, the high adoption of mobile ordering, the delivery apps, the social media engagement, and then you start to touch on what you were talking about when it comes to the taboo side of it. When I was looking after the e-commerce, the delivery angle, I saw just how important it was for some people to be able to feel confident in the protection of their own privacy when it comes to purchasing cannabis, because maybe they've got past the comfort of being able to purchase cannabis orientated products, but they didn't necessarily want to be perceived like that. So I share that because when you then think about this from the restaurant world, restaurants need to realize about the audience is far bigger than what they're initially thinking is. Maybe if you haven't deepened your understanding, you're not part of the cannabis culture yourself, you don't necessarily recognize that. So yes, you're right. You've got the QSRs of this world with, what was it, Jack in the Box and their Munchie Meals, which are leaning into humor and culture. Taco Bell are probably one of the best marketing organizations in the world, but the way in which they lean in to playful, light-hearted marketing, which is always very much around the brand. And so in that sense, I think Jack in the Box did that in this space here. The other piece of it is tapping into timing. Super Bowl weekend is one of the biggest weekends. It's almost, I can't remember the exact name.
Yeah, we just published a paper. It's on LinkedIn, specifically on cannabis trends around Super Bowl.
Is that right?
Yeah. And just even similar to this conversation around 420 for restaurants, cannabis brands advertising, with creative and targeting based around Super Bowl, because people are buying a ton of food, probably a ton of booze, they're buying a ton of cannabis.
Yeah, although the thing that I think is a big trend around a lot of this, and actually a big problem for restaurants right now, is people aren't buying a lot of booze.
Oh,
right?
okay.
They're seeking non-alcoholic alternatives. And I love was it the canned drinks that
Yes.
In your space, and that's my kind of way of being able to embrace that. But there's more and more of the 20-somethings these days are leaning into that direction. So again, you're talking about crowds turning up Super Bowl weekend, huge catering opportunity. Yes, you've got that event to look forward to, but also even bigger spend opportunities by focusing on that. So it's not just 420. What is it? Green Wednesday, right? Isn't that the day before Thanksgiving? That's another one. So having these kind of marketing opportunities and focusing on specific events when there's a greater propensity for someone to buy is exactly the same as what happens in restaurants as it happens in the cannabis space. The other thing I'd say is, not forgetting the importance of influencer, social engagement, being able to think of those cannabis-friendly brands and influencers that drive that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't always needing direct THC advertising, right? It can sometimes just be driving the awareness and having these conversations, much like you're trying to do with this particular session that we're having together. So yeah, I don't know, just limited time offers, munchies bundles, partnerships with cannabis brands or non-alcohol alternatives. Those kind of things, I think, are the ways in which restaurants are certainly going to be able to embrace this audience play.
Yeah, mate, I agree. And the agency world obviously play a big role in a lot of the restaurants, particularly the bigger chains. And I know that from a lot of experience working with them, even today, they're always looking for an edge as well. They're always looking for a different angle, something new. On the creative side, sure, I think you can do some really fun, and we are, by the way, as I've mentioned to you, I won't mention names now, but we've got a couple of really great iconic brands that we are going to be activating on this with this year, and they're doing, you can have a bit of fun with creative. To your point, you can be subtle. You don't have to be overt about it necessarily. So it's fun on the creative side, but it's really a big thing for the agencies and the media type focus folks. Really on the audiences. They love audiences and new audiences and being able to access new audiences because it's the same old in most cases. And cannabis audience, that's a pretty new segment. And one of the beauties of what we actually do is because we work so extensively with so many retailers and so many brands over the last 6+ years, we've got an awful lot of that data. We understand who the heavy cannabis user is through to the cannabis curious. And I love your remarks and the fact that you have had that experience, in the cannabis industry directly. It's not necessarily the stoner and the bong, right? Yeah, that's a segment, 100%. But it is the soccer mom with the canned beverages and the edibles. And there's just such a range now. If you walk into any dispensary, it's quite overwhelming, frankly, with the range of choice. Even for me, and I work in the industry, and many of these folks are customers, and so, but yeah, I digress. That's the opportunity, I think, for the restaurants and for the agencies, the folks that support them, is how can you talk to this audience, right? Creatively, strategically, with the right sort of data to target them and find them when they're online, and have a slightly different conversation. And it could be 420 probably is the tent pole because that's the one we all know. But to your point, there are other cannabis-related holidays throughout the year, and just generally, this is an audience that is, again, going back to my former point, new and exciting, and something for a lot of folks to tap. And again, I'm not necessarily saying anything new here because we've already mentioned some of these examples, right? Like I mentioned Ike's, you mentioned Jack in the Box. There was even a show
KFC, right? Do you remember the KFC one, the saucy nuggets? That was kind of subtle.
Well, when I first saw that, I didn't know if it was a piss take or not, but it turned out it was legit because I thought, wow, KFC. I guess they're part of Yum, and that Taco Bell maybe culture is to do with that. But there's even been on channels like Hulu. There's been there was a show that Jimmy Kimmel did. One of our customers here, MMD, there are a large group of dispensaries here in the Los Angeles area. They did a whole reality TV show on the dispensary, right? So it is. It's jumped the shark in that regard. I mean, call me biased, which I am obviously a little bit because I'm so involved in it, but I think the taboo, certainly in the adult use states, and these are the most popular states now. I mean, New York's just gone adult use legality. Obviously California, some very popular states. It's the taboo is gone, and I think that the opportunity is there for restaurant brands to tap into this audience. What do you think, Carl, though, beyond 420? How can, let's say there's a restaurant brand who, have been thinking about this for a while. They've been a little, maybe trepidatious about, going down this road based on, again, that taboo and so forth. But if someone's looking to, all right, we feel confident enough in our markets with our brand to go down this road. Would it be, do something around 420 to test and learn? What would be your sort of general strategic approach there?
I think the main approach is leaning into your data, because your data will help you see what is going to be most appropriate for your brand and the opportunities that exist, right? So clearly there's something about leaning into that. If there is that validation that you see when you test these things out and do appropriate kind of A/B testing to see which particular words, which particular images, which particular levels of the kind of cannabis culture that you touch on in a subtle fashion get some resonance, then you start to build this platform of understanding which are your consumer segments that you can actually maybe target, or maybe even target in around specific spending peaks. So that way, this doesn't have to be something that you're going to expect to see on every single television screen everywhere, but actually very focused social media spend to certain segments of your customer base. And I think when you think about that from the angle of Green Wednesday, and Super Bowl weekend, summer festivals, music events, all of those types of things allow you to be able to use those opportunities to see whether you get little spikes based on those different triggers. And we all know that the best marketeers are doing it, right? They won't have just one version of an ad and they'll throw that out there. They'll test this stuff. So embrace this type of thinking as well when it comes to this particular market segment. And that therefore also then means if you do get some validation, if you do start to see some of those spikes coming through, that gives you some opportunity then to look into developing some unique digital marketing campaigns, which allows you to target cannabis-friendly consumers via social ads, app notifications, text messages, and the like. Maybe you can start rewarding those particular consumers through your loyalty programs, Munchies Mondays and stuff like that. Those ways are ways to be able to say, we welcome you. And the brand actually embraces that. And maybe we're going to get to a place in the years ahead, Anthony, where we'll actually see collaboration with dispensaries for cross promotions, right? Maybe you get to see QR codes in store leading to delivery deals and things like that. Who knows, right? And then going into my world from the AI perspective, if you have the AI powered marketing and you can utilize agents to be able to do a lot of that testing for you in the background, therefore in a more efficient fashion, that allows you to be able to get to those outcomes a lot faster. And that allows you then to develop more data-driven promotions to be able to get the revenues that you're seeking. So it's all in that space, I think, that we're going to see it come to the foremost.
Mate, you sound like a CMO almost these days, or in that. Where this is, you really know what you're talking about there. I mean, you're not a trained marketer per se, right? But
you know me, I'm a jack. I'm a jack.
Yeah, you got the gift of the gab now, mate. I love that. Well, mate, look, I loved having the conversation, and it's just really a marriage made in heaven. I think there's some other industries that are quite interesting, like travel and a few others that have like interesting connections to cannabis as well. But to your point, I guess to my point as well, it's a large swathe of the population that are either regular consumers or more part-time casual consumers, or would even just maybe have a giggle at it. Maybe they, smoked at university and haven't since, but are, impartial about people doing it, And so that's, nationally, I reckon it's got to be at least half the country, these days, and certainly in some of these states. So, the shackles are off, and the opportunity is definitely there. So hopefully we see more and more sort of fun, especially 420 sort of fun stuff going on from the restaurants, and hopefully beyond that as well.
Totally, mate. Yeah, I agree. Restaurants have to lean into changing consumer habits. Cannabis is shifting the mainstream, just like craft beer did a few years ago. And this is a loyalty goldmine. High repeat spenders, digital first consumers, a prime market for off-peak revenue as well, right? So the biggest mistake restaurants can make is ignoring this audience.
Right. Well put. I mean, that's a great place to wrap it up, mate. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it, mate. And we'll see what happens this year. We'll report back into you what we see from the restaurant sector over the course of the next few months, Carl, and maybe we'll do a rehash next year.
Sounds good, my friend. Nice to see you.
All right, mate. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Thanks, mate.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, that was wonderful. Thank you. You know, again, it's not the restaurants. I don't have a restaurant team going after restaurants per se, but I felt very passionate about it last year, and I just missed the boat because it's got to be a 420 thing to get them to dip the toe,
Yeah.
And then go from there. So, mate, this is great. I'm going to get this to Nicole. We'll figure out. It will go up on social. We'll figure out where it's going to go. There might be a few cuts, but she'll share all that with you as well. Other than that, mate, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Let me know when it's launched, and I'll send it out as well.
All right, we'll get this year. We're going to get together. And did I tell you I got engaged?
You did. I'm just waiting for the what's the big day? Have you set a date?
July next year.
July next year. Oh my goodness.
So we're actually off to Australia in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Got to go renew the visa again. Every 2 years.
I'll see you in August then.
No, 10 days. 10 days.
No, it's a new president now, mate.
Well, I'm on a different visa.
No, but hey, the way the executive orders are flying down, you never know.
10 days. The lawyers told us literally today it's going to be a week and a half. So we're doing an engagement party. Christine hasn't met my family yet, right? Because we're here. So except for my nieces. So anyway, I got an engagement party in a couple of weeks. We've got I got my first bachelor party there. My second one is in Cabo in October.
Nice.
But yeah, the wedding's next year in July, mate, because, well, first of all, there's a place we really wanted to get in Topanga.
Yeah.
And we just could not get any date this year that we actually wanted. And we felt quite rushed. By the way, do you have to go? I'm probably talking into your next call.
I got another minute. It's good.
Yeah, I'm giving you too much detail. So anyway, it's very stress-free so far.
Yeah, nice.
Having the time and then giving